Hello everyone, thank you for coming to my webinar that is devoted to Rooks on the 7th rank. This is FIDE Master Viktor Neustroyev, and I'm really glad that today there are already 21 members on the webinar. However, it's only the 3rd day of our new year. By the way, Happy New Year to you all. Okay. So please let me know if you can, if the sound and video quality is good. I believe the lighting is much better today. Okay, everything is good. It's perfect. Guys who attend this webinar for the first time, please let me know where are you from and what's your feeder elo, or if you don't have a feeder, then just your chess.com elo. Okay, so while you're doing it, I'm going to share some educational resources that I highly recommend you to visit from time to time. Maybe you'll find something interesting and helpful. First of all, this is my profile on chess.com, so you may send me a friend request. So we can play games, maybe daily games, or you can attend my simuls, or just follow my announcements. Because from time to time I conduct simuls. This is our educational group, Tricks of Chess. I'm also going to send you the link. And this is where I post some educational stuff. For example, so the stream of this webinar is here. Live webinar 63. And if you, for some reason, can't find it neither on YouTube nor on our Click Meetings webinar platform, you may find it here. Another important thing is my website. So, for example, you can find online courses there. If you like them, you can enroll, or if you have some questions, don't hesitate to ask me. However, another important part of my website is my chess blog, where I publish some interesting news. Some of them are helpful. For example, how to bounce back from a tough loss. This is a really good article. I highly recommend you to watch. Those who now follow the series of best chess player of all time, please watch the final version, number 5, about Magnus Carlsen. I also cover it. Vishy Anand, Garry Kasparov, Bobby Fischer, and Emanuel Lasker. Okay, fine. This is the link to my website. And finally, the link to my YouTube channel. So now I'm streaming this webinar. You can, if I refresh the page, you may find the stream here. No, it's webinar. No. It's weird. For some reason, you can't see this, but there is a playlist webinars where you can watch all the recordings of my previous webinars if you want. Okay, so some webinars should be added. Not all of them are there, but almost all of them. And if you want, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. So this is the link. I highly recommend you to do it, because this is where I post all interesting videos first. And only after that, maybe in a day or two, I publish them on chess.com. And of course, not all of them. Okay, fine. So we did the obligatory part of our webinar. So the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to share the board. Okay, guys, please let me know if the sound is good. Let me check what microphone. Yeah, so I have a professional microphone, Rode NT, and I think the sound should be fine. Okay, and the camera is also full HD. Okay, perfect. Okay, who do we have today? So Alessandro from Italy, Alfonso from Philippines, Stefan, Germany, around 1500. Zayan from is about 1000. So Nilanch from India. No, of course, Michael. Okay, Oscar from Chicago. Good. Okay, and Zayan is from Colorado. Okay, perfect. So for those who don't know where I'm from Russia. I live in Novosibirsk. This is the central part of Russia, and it's quite cold right now. It's minus 35. That's why I'm wearing not a t-shirt, but a hoodie. But it's okay. It's it's quite warm inside the room. Okay, fine. So today we're going to talk about 7th rank. Not minus 25, but minus 35 Celsius. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Rooks on the 7th rank. So of course you know that when it comes to the end game, if only you have a chance, you should get your Rook to the 7th rank to be able to capture enemy pawns standing there, or to prevent the enemy king to join the center. This is how you cut the enemy king off. If you can get 2 rooks to the 7th rank in the end game, you almost guarantee a draw, because they can always deliver a perpetual check. That's why old Soviet coaches said activity is better than material if speaking about rooks and games, and this is absolutely true. So maybe they just repeat from a famous grandmaster, but this is what I learned from Soviet masters. So if you want to at least to get a draw in rook and game, you should activate your rooks. Especially the best thing to do is to get them to the 7th rank. You can also threaten with a checkmate sometimes. Of course, it depends. But a perpetual check is almost guaranteed. Okay, fine. Yeah, if speaking about middle games, there the rooks on the 7th rank can be even more important, because they can interact with the queen and threaten a checkmate. For example, like it can be in this position that is taken from the game between Mikhail Botvinnik and Vassily Smyslov. So please look at this position and tell me what white should do. Okay. So, for example, okay. Oh, there are a few suggestions. Knight g5, rook e7. Okay. No, let's analyze rook e7. So rook e7, knight takes e7, rook takes e7. I don't think it works. So what if I just play rook f7? This is how I can avoid the checkmate. Oh, before doing it, let me deliver maybe a check here. Then a rook bishop f1, and then I play rook f7. I'm sure there is no checkmate. King escapes to e6, and there are almost no checks. I think black is winning. No. Rook e7 sacrifice is not so good in this exact position. Knight g5, there was a move. So then f takes g5. What else do you suggest to be played? Oh man, who did? Okay, so Inesh and Marcel both suggested to play knight g5, so and then bishop c6. Wait a sec. If bishop c6 is played, what do you think black can do? Okay, you see now it's queen f2. And after king h1, it's black who wins the game. So knight g5 unfortunately doesn't work. Okay. Knight h4. Yes, I remember there was such a suggestion, but no, let's say I play maybe something like that. So what? How to deal with it? Knight takes g6. Wait a sec. Knight takes g6. Queen takes g6. Black is fine with it. f4. No, first of all, let's analyze rook takes e5. F takes e5. And the f2 is hanging. That's the problem. So f4 is another move to analyze in this position. I don't think it's a big problem. So what about knight g4? The queen is trapped. No, in the original position, bishop takes c6 cannot be played. There is a knight blocking it. So what other suggestions do you have in the original positions? Shalom, bishop e4 in which line? Okay, knight d4 is another suggestion. Rook 3 e2. As for rook 3 e2, I think queen c3 is fine. And what then? Because the rook can be hanging on e1 in some variations. Okay, so the correct move in this position is knight d4. Now black has several options. So what do they have? They can capture on d4 with the pawn or with their knight. Let's analyze what happens if pawn takes, c takes d4. How do we continue? What's the idea of this knight sacrifice? So the defender is removed. Okay, so bishop d5. I knew this correct. If king h8, then just rook e7. And then there is no rook f7 move. So queen c1, queen d1, king g2, and no more checks. Queen c1 is the only way to escape, but then just queen takes queen. So there is no rook f7 and no defense against the checkmate on g7 or h7, only queen c1, queen sacrifice. So that's why this no, rook f7 is the other option. If rook f7, please tell me how white wins immediately. Just in a few moves. Yeah, true. It's rook e8. And yeah, rook takes rook, and this is a mate. Right, so rook f7 is a bad move. Of course, rook takes d5 is the only logical solution. And in such a case, we play rook e7. Oh, yeah, no, rook e7 doesn't work. If we play rook e7, then knight takes, rook takes. And probably he can save the position. Can he? Rook f7. Yeah, rook f7. Yeah, rook f7 works in this position because rook e8 cannot be played. The bishop is there. Right. So rook e7 is a mistake, but after the 8th rook went to the 5th rank, we can play rook e8. And if they take, we checkmate with rook takes rook and then queen f8. If not, then we take on the next move. So the problem of this position is there is no option to protect this rook with anything. The only option is to play this move, but then just queen f8, and that's it. And of course, if rook takes rook, king f7, queen f8, this is a checkmate. Okay, so in this line, rook e7, knight e7, rook e7, g5 doesn't work. Yes, the queen protects on h7, but queen g7 is another mate. So if c takes d8, bishop d5 to distract the rook, and then the knight on c6 blocks the bishop, and it's not guarding the e8 square. Fine. So the other option to play in this position is to capture on d4 with a knight. What do you think we should do in such a case? Bishop d5. Okay, this is what Marcel suggests. Rook e7 by Inesh. Rook e7. C takes d4. Okay, c takes d4 could make sense, but no, I think if we can play much better. Rook e8 cannot be played, of course, because of the bishop on a4. Okay, so who knows why bishop d5 in this position doesn't work? Bishop attacking e8, but what about rook e7? So rook takes here, rook e7, and in this position, for example, rook f7 is a bad move, because after such a move, we play rook e8 and still win the game. Right? So, but what's the problem? What black can do after rook 3 to e7? Knight e3, king h1. And it doesn't help. Okay, again, Anirudh is correct in this game. On this webinar today, it's knight e2. The idea is to block the connection between rooks. No, knight f5 doesn't work because queen h7 mate, of course. So how to play? For example, rook takes. And then, for example, rook d1. If they take here, it's just a trade. And this trade is in the black favor because they have extra piece. So 2 rooks plus bishop versus queen. Absolutely winning for black. Rook d1. What else can be played? Maybe this rook can capture. Then I'm sure it's even a losing position. What can happen? What do you think? So let's deliver a check. No, if he goes rook e1, he's just a piece down. If he plays this move, bishop c6, f3, and in this position we may continue with bishop f3. King takes, queen f5. In case of king e3, rook d3 is made, and if he goes there, then queen f1 is made. If king e3, rook d3. This is a mate. Of course, you may say that it's not obligatory to capture. He may play this move, but I'm sure it's still a losing position. For example, rook f1, king takes f1, bishop takes e2, oh, and then rook f7. If rook goes there, then just queen d3. And black is better in this position because of 2 extra pawns. So after knight e2, what they can do? If they move the king, they gonna be... Okay, what gonna happen? Rook f7 is enough. Because rook takes rook, king f7, black is fine. And rook e8 doesn't work because in this position, this square is covered with the bishop on a4. Okay, so knight e2, king f1 is the only option. How to deal with king f1? No, knight g3 is a useless move. I don't think it works. Just h takes g3 and white is fine. So rook f7 should be played. Rook takes f7, king takes f7, queen takes there, king f8. So the idea is that there is no checkmate, and the only thing that they can do is to continue checking with h7 and h8 squares, because if only king goes to e7 or e8, then rook captures e2 and white gains a queen. If, for example, rook takes e2 immediately, then either bishop b5 or I think maybe this move is better, because if rook e1, then bishop b5 now, king goes to g2, and rook takes e1, black is winning. So the only thing that they have to play is a perpetual check. So white is not winning in such a case. That's why bishop d5 was a mistake, because in such a case, black could interfere the e file by playing knight e2. So it's not a bishop d5. The only other move left is rook e7. Mm-hmm. So what if, for example, knight e2 in this position? What's the difference? The difference is that here we capture, and then we go with our rook back to e7, still threatening with a checkmate. It's a useless move. So rook f7 is the only continuation. What do you think? How to win? Okay, so for those who joined later, what are we doing? We are talking about the rooks standing on the 7th ranks. I already mentioned that rook on the 7th rank is good in the endgame, where you can capture enemy pawns standing there. However, it's also important and even more helpful in the middle game, because together with the queen, rook can deliver a checkmate, or at least to create mating threats. So, and this is what I'm showing you. This is the game between Mikhail Botvinnik and Vassily Smyslov, where white could get his rook to the 7th rank and checkmate. So your task is to listen to my questions and provide me with some suggestions. What you think? So what to do then? Bishop d5 in this position. Okay, so bishop d5 is the most simple way to continue here. Another option is to play rook f7. This is a long way. Then knight e2, rook takes e2, rook d1, check. So bishop f1. Oh, here white is threatening with a checkmate. Also, the queen is under attack. Queen d1, rook e1. Then he probably plays bishop b5. Then a few more moves. King g1 maybe. And then he captures on f7 with his queen. And in this position, white is better because of extra exchange, rook versus bishop. But of course, white has to play some exact moves to be able to finish the game on his own, or in his favor. This is what I mean. So instead of playing rook takes f7, bishop d5 is a much better option, after which it's difficult to suggest anything. So, for example, what can be played? Of course, rook d5, we checkmate with rook e8. Bishop takes e8. And so on. Rook takes e8, rook f8, queen f8 mate. So in this position, black could find another move, knight f3. How would you continue in such a case? What do you think? King h1? Why not bishop takes f3? Yes, exactly. It's king h1. Because if bishop takes f3, so bishop takes f3, then queen c3. And if now rook f7, the other rook on e1 is hanging with a check. So king f7 and black is winning. If, for example, black here decides first to play bishop d5, which also looks good, then what do you think black can play? Wait, no, the rook is pinned. What are you talking about? Rook f8. Now, rook f8, bishop f7, rook f7, rook e8 leads to a checkmate. Okay, what's the problem with the chessboard? Forrest, which device do you use? And if not, then maybe you can join. You can watch the webinar on YouTube. So for those who can't watch the webinar or for some reason don't see the board, you can watch it on YouTube. Okay, so Rook D5. Rook D5, Rook E8, of course. No, the best move, again, Anirudh is correct. So looks like Anirudh, we are doing really well because I think this is the result of solving many puzzles that I give you as a homework. So yes, Queen E1 is the only move. Rook takes E1, then Rook takes D5, and White is better, but not really much. I think the position is approximately equal. Maybe White is just slightly better because it's Queen versus Rook, Bishop, and 2 pawns. Of course, the king is quite weak, and these 2 pawns are compensated. But anyway, it's difficult to play this position for a victory for White. So that's why not Bishop D5 here. And this is how Queen C3 saves the game. That's why it's better not to capture these knight on F3, but play king to H1. What can be played? For example, if knight E1, then Rook F7, king goes to H8, and Bishop D5 back. Now there is no defense. Other move is Queen F2, threatening with a checkmate. However, looks like it doesn't work. Bishop F5. Oh, Bishop takes F7, King H8. Oh, wait. Then how to continue? So, Anirudh, why Queen F2 is a blunder? Rook E8, Rook takes E8. What then? Okay, Bishop takes E8. Okay, while you're thinking... Oh, actually, no, you are correct. Inesh is the first who suggests the right move. Yes, it's Rook E8, Rook takes Rook, Rook takes Rook, Bishop takes Rook, Queen F8 is a mate. Right, okay, that was a good question. Let me answer it. So theoretically, would it be recommended to always take advantage of pinned pieces to leverage gaining material? No, not always, but almost always. Yes, this is what I recommend. You pile up the pressure on the piece that is pinned, and this is how you gain more material. For example, if you have extra queen, it's not required. You can just trade the pieces off and finish with extra queen. But if you're just a pawn up or maybe a piece up, then why not? Okay, so what questions do you have? Why Queen F2 in this position? But okay, suggest anything else. Knight G5 maybe? How to play after Knight G5? Just take, Knight takes, Rook takes, King takes, Queen goes there, King F8, queen e7, king g8, queen d8. Doesn't really matter where he goes, g7 or h7. We check with the rook. He goes there, queen h8, g5, queen h4, f5, queen f4 mate. What about knight d6 instead of queen f2? Okay. What about, wait, when knight d6? No, it's not. Rook d6. Oh, what are you asking about? Before this? When? Knight e6 in this position or what? Just go back a few moves. Okay. So knight d4, knight takes d4, rook e7, and what? Okay, I think it's clear. There is no knight d6 move, and if it was, I don't think it could work. Okay, fine. So let's now go back. This is what Mikhail Botvinnik could play, but instead he played bishop h3 and continued playing this game for 40 moves more, and finally was able to win. So he missed knight d4 option and didn't win the game immediately. So we guys, we are better than Mikhail Botvinnik because we found this move. Okay, let me close it. The next game, no, not this one. The next game fragment is taken from the game between Boris Gelfand and Gata Kamsky. So I don't think that we need the opening. Let's look at this position. So e5 was played here by Boris Gelfand. Actually, it's not a new position. It happened in 3 different games. But first, it happened in this exact game in 1996. So, of course, in this position, we can't move the rook because the knight is hanging, but knight d4 can be played. And if now e takes d6, knight takes e2, king takes f1, and knight c1, bishop c1, then after bishop f6, I think black has enough chances to make at least a draw. Maybe even to play for a victory because of the distant pass pawn on a7. Because the bishop on f6 is covering the d8 square, and I think black is absolutely fine. So after knight d4, what do you think white should do? Rook c7, and what about knight takes bishop on e2? So, and what about king f1? You mean the knight has no squares to go? Okay, king f1, I play knight c3. Okay, there is another good suggestion. Bishop d4, rook takes d4, and rook c7. Not this rook, but the c rook. Okay, what can I say? probably rook f8, and at least this is... Oh, no, not rook f8. What am I talking about? Rook f4. Rook f4, and black is better. So knight d4 was played. Yeah, so the correct answer is to play rook c to c7 and sacrifice the piece. Knight e2, king goes there. Of course, knight c3, neither knight c3 nor knight d4 or any other knight move can be played because the rook is hanging. That's why the rook has to be played. You may also say, why not to play rook bishop f1 in this position? Because the problem is that the rook is under attack. It can't move out of the d file because the knight will be hanging. But actually, in this position, rook c6 can be played, and this move simplifies the position. So rook c6, knight c6, and white has to play for a draw. Fine. So rook c to c7 was played, knight e2, king f1, and the rook is under attack. A better move was rook d5, but rook d8 was played in the game. How to continue? So maybe we should take the knight? No, yes. Rook f7, of course. This is how we double attack. Two pieces are hanging. And now another important question for you. No, actually, if only we took on e2, he would play rook d to b8, and we have to trade rooks. Maybe we would continue with this move, but then a rook takes rook takes b7, and then a5, and no, at least black has a draw. So rook f7. Where the bishop should move to? What do you think? So it has two squares, f8 or h8. Yeah, okay. Okay, guys, I see. But please explain, why do you think f8? Why do you think h8? Oh, wait a sec. If bishop f8, then bishop c5 doesn't work. Bishop c5, bishop takes bishop. And what's then? It's only perpetual check with rook g7. But of course, white doesn't want to deliver perpetual check. White wants to win. f8 restricts the king. But on the f8, the bishop is more activated. Okay, what about h8 square? Why do you think the bishop on h8 is better? Okay, guys, what if I say that bishop h8 is the best move? So the bishop should definitely move to h8, and only that move could offer some drawing chances for black. Who knows why? Okay, the idea of bishop h8 is that this move covers the f6 square, so there is no double attack on two pawns. And in this position, we have to play maybe this move, then a5, rook f2, e7, rook e8, rook takes rook, and in this position, after he may take, but this is how we activate the king. So, and after rook d7, white is just slightly better, but it's not obvious how to win this game with such a bad pawn structure. Double pawns on the f file. So bishop h8 could offer practical chances for a draw, but bishop f8 was played in the game by Gata Kamsky. Okay, so then king e2. So for some reason I can't make this move on the board. I don't know why. It's something wrong happens with chess base, and there is no engine working, because I decided to analyze the games without engine, only using my own mind, because that helps me to keep myself in a good condition. I can't touch my pieces. Okay. Oh, now it's better. So king e2 was played. Fine. King e2. So rook d to b8 to offer a rook trade, rook takes rook. And then rook f6, not rook a7. If rook a7 it's close to a draw, then maybe rook b2 can be played. Or rook b3 restricting the king. So rook f6, because the a pawn is a weakness already. We need to take at least one more pawn. What do you think? How to continue? No, I mean, how black should continue? This is the question. King h7, king g7. So, for example, king g7 can be played. If so, then rook e6, rook b2, king d3, a5, and which move wins the game? What white should do in this position? What do you think? Rook a6? Come on, guys. There is definitely a better move. Okay, so it's not bishop d4, and finally Marcel suggested f5. Of course, f5. So the idea is that if he takes, he blunders a piece. So king g8 faces with rook e8, and king f7, of course, with rook f6. Of course, you may say that g5 can be played in such a position, but wait, how to deal with these two connected passed pawns? I think the game is over. And either rook g6 and e6, or rook a6, rook a6 and e6 with a pawn can be played, for example. Absolutely winning position. So king g7 is not a good choice. Rook e8 was played. Rook takes g6. Where should enemy king go to? f7 or h7? Okay, why f7? No, okay, so actually the key answer here is to h7. If only it goes to f7, just rook f6 with a temper, and he can't go to e7 because of bishop c5, he loses a piece. So he has to go back, and this is how he loses a tempo. So that's why the king should go there. Rook f6, threatening with rook f7 mate. No, rook f7 fork, this is what I meant. If now king g7, how do you continue? f5, exactly. And if he takes, we take on h6, trade pieces off. And how do you evaluate this position? What white should do to be able to win this game, if he can, of course. Yeah, okay, so winning for white. Bring the king out. No, king d3, king e7, king c4, king e6. Okay, exactly. f4 first to create a distant passed pawn. And only then move the king to the edge pawn to be able to take it. While this king, the f8 king, should be tied down to this pawn. If only he goes somewhere there, then e6 and the pawn is promoted. It has to stay somewhere close to the e6 square. So king g7 didn't work, and a5 was played. Sorry. a5. Now, maybe king f3 was a better move, with the idea to get the king out of the e file. But white decided to play f5 immediately. That was a kind of inaccuracy, but still allowed white to win. If a4, then rook e6, rook takes e6, f takes e6, king g6, and after king d3, the position is winning. 2 extra pawns, and the a4 pawn dies. For example, if king f5, then I think bishop h6 is enough to win. e7, a3, e8, a2, and after queen f7, the game is over. That's why here it was played e takes f5. f4, protecting the pawn. Rook e8. Rook takes f5. a4. Rook f7 check. King g8. How do you think we should continue in such a position? e6, a3, e7, bishop takes e7, rook takes e7, a2. And then white has to sacrifice their bishop. And it will be 2 pawns versus 1 on the same flank, which might be a draw. Is likely to be a draw even. So it's not e6, it should be something else. e6, a3. Okay, so here my nut is correct. It's rook a7. Rook goes there. So rook has to take, otherwise the pawn is lost. Bishop takes. Now bishop a3, because if now a3 is played, then f5, a2, bishop d4, the pawn is stopped. And white wins because of 2 connected passed pawns in the center. So bishop a3, bishop d4, bishop c1, attacking the pawn, f5, a3. If a3, then king d3, and everything is fine. If a3, then king d3, and if bishop b2, then bishop takes bishop, pawn takes, and the king is in time. So that's why king f7 was played in the game. king d3, a3, king c2, and after bishop f4, we just need to move the pawn. And then we are able to take the pawn on a3. So bishop b2, e6 check, and then we take. They played a few more moves, but it's obvious that the position is winning because rook b2 at least, or bishop b2 at least offers a bishop straight, after which the pawn in game is absolutely winning because of the passed pawn on e6. This is how Boris Gelfand won that game. So let's now go back. Instead of playing something else in this exact position, he decided to play for activity. He activated his second rook and sacrificed the bishop. Of course, that was a temporary sacrifice. Everyone understood it, but before that, White decided to go to this position because he was sure that this rook activity can bring some winning chances for White. This is what happens. Of course, it's not obligatory for Black to lose the game. If, for example, later he would play bishop f8, h8, sorry, then he could probably draw the game or at least try to save the position. But he played bishop f8, what looks more natural, but at the same time was a critical mistake. Okay, fine. That was a game between Boris Gelfand and Gata Kamsky, and two rooks on the 7th rank in the end game. The last game we are going to observe is the game between Petr Svidler and John Ludvig Hammer from Denmark. Okay, so again, we don't need the full game to analyze. Let's just analyze from a certain position. Just wait a sec. Oh, if you have any questions, you may ask me while I'm loading this game. So in this position, White is down a pawn, but f5 was played, and that move offered some practical chances for White, and of course White successfully took them. Instead, maybe rook 5 to d7 can be played. Rook d7, bishop a5, equal number of pawns, rook a7, bishop b5, king f7. It's gonna be a draw, I believe. But f5. So what do you think how to continue for White in this position? Okay, so there is a general question of how to adapt to play in a closed position. In a closed position, you should follow the plan. And it's almost impossible to play in a closed position without a plan. No, what do I recommend? Just watch more grandmasters games when they have to play in the close positions and try to understand the plans behind their moves. If you can't do it on your own, just ask someone who is much stronger than you, like 2000 player or even candidate master, FIDE master, international master, anybody. So, right. So here the best move is a rook b to b7. Bishop f8 was played in this game, actually. Here, bishop f8 was correct. If, for example, bishop f6, then what do you think can be played? Rook f7, you mean? No, it's not so good. Rook f7, if rook f7, then rook c8 with a counterplay, then rook c2 and so on. No, it's too risky for white. No. Rook h7, still rook c8. So rook h7, I play rook c8, and you have to retreat and offer rook straight, what leads to a draw. But if you want to win, what move should you play in this position? Bishop a5? No, bishop a5 is a bishop blunder. No, f4, you're very close. First, let's fix the weakness by playing a4. They try to save the pawn. And then f4 using this pin. Rook e8, king f2. So the bishop is hanging. If it goes back, just rook b6, and there are no pieces to protect on g6. And this is how white can get a much better position with good chances to succeed. That's why not bishop f6, but bishop f8 was played. a4, rook c5, offering a trade. Oh, of course, e4 was a weird move, because after rook h7, we are threatening with a checkmate rook h8. So rook c5, rook takes c5, bishop takes c5, bishop takes c5. Okay, why not to take this pawn? What can you say? Rook e8, rook b5. Yes, it's a rook d4. So by playing such a move, it's easy to attack the weakness on a4. If, for example, rook b5, that still makes sense. Then I think bishop d6 is a good move. And because a4 dies anyway. No, bishop c3, for example, bishop a4, and the pawn on e4 is not hanging, because if only bishop a5, then rook e4 check. So actually, bishop a5 could lead to a draw after rook d4. That's why bishop takes c5. So who can tell me what about this move? Of course, we all understand that f4 is played. But let's say then I play bishop d6. Rook b5. Bishop takes a5. What? Okay. Rook b5, bishop takes a5. What would you capture on a5, and how do you evaluate the position after that? So you want to capture with a rook? Why not? Rook, king f7, king e3, king e6, king f4. No, I don't think it works. Let's check. So rook e8, f4, bishop d6, rook b5, bishop takes e5. So here Anirudh wants to capture with a rook. However, I believe a pawn move is much better. So pawn move, the pawn is hanging here, so probably rook e8 should be played, but if so, then king e3 or king d3 and white is better. However, if you decide to capture with a rook takes e5, f takes e5, king f7, king e3, king e6, king where? No, I don't believe d4 works because this is how they can create a distant passed pawn by playing these moves. So probably there, h6, h4, g5, h takes g5, h takes g5, king takes g5, king e5. And g3, king e4, g4. He goes there and black wins. Okay, so to take with a rook is not a good idea. But to take with a pawn, then the game is winning, is likely to be winning. So bishop e5 and rook e8 wasn't played. Instead, rook d5 was played. f4, and then he offers a bishop straight. What do you think? How to continue? What? Bishop c7, you mean? What for? So if we take, it will be a double attack. That shouldn't be, that's not a good idea. Rook b8, king f7. So looks like rook b8 is not doing much. Okay, rook b5, this is correct. After this trade, the b pawn can be promoted. So bishop b6, king d3, and then bishop d4 probably to trade the bishops off and promote the pawn. So if he takes, it's absolutely winning position. Like that. Then a5 is lost and the game is over. Yes, it's called Zugzwang. If he plays bishop c7, then after g3 first, then b6. Yeah, bishop a7 works in this position, but b6 is good enough. Yeah, so he has to trade the bishops. And after king c7, we play this move and promote one of the pawns. So rook shouldn't take, it goes back to d7, d3, just to improve the pawn structure. Bishop takes e5, rook takes e5. If rook a7 in this position, what can you say about the position? What white should do, in your opinion? Bring the king to b5, exactly. So king d3, the position is winning. So rook d4 was played instead. Rook takes a5, king goes there, rook checks. He played a few checks, maybe just to accumulate some time, and a5. Then a few more checks, a6, rook d6, and h4. The idea of such a move is to play h5 to break the pawn structure, and then everything is simple. So two pawns are captured. Black has to attack this pawn from behind to prevent it from promotion. Rook h7, check, king d1, then check to avoid a checkmate, but this is actually a winning position. King e1, this king is cut off, king goes to the kingside, and finally rook f7 with the idea to capture the pawn. With 2 pawns, of course, white is absolutely winning. So, and then he promotes 2 pawns together by helping with this rook. The rook can check from the side. Okay, fine. So let's go back. In this position, rook b7 was played, and here 2 rooks on the 7th rank at least could offer a draw for white, but because Blake played a few mistakes, then the a5 pawn was taken, and white passed the game into a better rook endgame and was able to succeed. So what you may learn from this webinar, if only you have a chance to occupy the 7th rank with your rooks, it's always good. Just, but don't forget to calculate the line, of course. You may blunder anything. If you are allowed to do it on the middle game, it's also good because in the middle game, the rook standing on the 7th rank can join the attack, and that can be extremely dangerous for the enemy king. Okay. Okay, Marcel, this is a good question. If the king must be on the 8th rank or not? No, it's not obligatory. The idea is that the pawns are located on the 7th rank. If you want to cut the enemy king off, then yes, the king should be on the 8th rank. But if you just want to capture the pawns, it's not obligatory. Okay, guys, thank you for attending this webinar. Do you have any questions? So if you like the webinar, I kindly request you to invite your friends who also might be interested in such educational webinars. So the next webinar will be next Sunday, same time. So, and of course, I kindly remind you to send me a friend request on chess.com, and also to subscribe to my YouTube channel. So the next webinar will be next Sunday. So okay, I'll keep in mind about endgames. The simul will be by the end of January. My website. Okay, yes, sure. This is my website. Oh, are 2 rooks better than a queen? You're speaking about 2 rooks on the 7th rank. I would say yes, but of course, everything depends on the concrete position. Generally speaking, yes. And about the tournament, the last thing that I wanted to mention, that in late January, I'm going to announce the second tournament of my Honest Chess League. So if you want to participate in such a tournament, you should contact me. Now, the best way to reach me is to send an email at tricksofchess@gmail.com. If you are looking for video courses or just for private lessons, you may also contact using this email. The tournament is free for those who already participated in the first one. It's not federating. However, the fee for the tournament will be quite low. It will be about $5. And of course, there will be a first money prize. Maybe 2 money prizes. Any other questions? Okay, yes, of course, I understand, because such tournaments is a good practice for my students too. And I think maybe about 40% of all participants there are my students. So there will be 3 prizes as usual. First 2 will be money prizes. The third one will be something like maybe a private session with me. The time control will be 45 plus 30. Okay, so Marcel is asking for some Sicilian games for the next webinar. Maybe. Is it okay to sacrifice a piece or pawn for a counterplay if you are the defender? You may sacrifice something if you believe your position is better, and it doesn't matter who is attacker and who is defender. So, I mean, if your position is better, then all tacticals, not all, but most of tactical strikes will be in your favor. So yes, a bishop pair is better than a knight pair in the end game, but of course it depends on the position and depends on the pawn structure, because in a closed position, of course, knights are better. Rui Lopez and what to play against Rui Lopez. Against Rui Lopez, I recommend to play a Marshall's counterattack. And maybe that's a good idea. Why not to conduct the next webinar about Marshall's counterattack? That makes sense. Okay, fine. If everything is okay and you are satisfied with my answers, I hope to see you next Sunday. Okay, see you. Bye-bye.